All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Well, this week we begin with vaYiqra, chapter 15, verse 13. Now, we left off with verse 12, which, after I translated it, said, "But vessels made of clay that were touched by he with a flow will be shattered, but implements of wood will be washed in water." Um, just thinking about that this morning before we get started on this next verse, I've watched a number of videos on the internet and on cable TV and stuff like that. And they had these guys that go over to Israel and they're in these digs. And one that stood out to me was Mossad, I think. I think it was Mossad. They had found all of these busted up vessels just in piles beside this wall, inside this what had been a building that had the walls were about anywhere from 3 to 5 feet high on one side, well, really kind of all the way around. And they surmised that, well, there must have been this terrible earthquake, except there were no evidence of earthquake elsewhere. And then, well, perhaps there was a big battle in here. Well, there was no evidence of that either. I would suggest that perhaps this is where they put this stuff, that this was, in effect, the unclean place, the uh, place outside the bulk of the community. Because they tried to make it all kinds of different things. Because, well, look, there's all this burned stuff and there's all this just otherwise trash in there. Hello. I'm just going to throw that out there. I mean, that may not be correct, but it would at least be a theory that should be thought of. So anyway, we begin with 13, which very literally in English says, "And for he cleaned that flow from flow he, and number 2 he 7 days to cleaning he, and wash garment his, and wash flesh he in waters living and clean." I guess you can't just wash in living waters, you have to wash in living clean water. No, that's not what that says. So anyway, we're going to start off. Your first word is veki, and that's and if. Yitahar, he clean. That's to be or to become clean. But we're talking about purification according to the laws of Torah, of course. And since this person had a flow, we obviously know that's what he's talking about here, since I read that just now. Well, then this would be the purification because he had the flow. Now he's become clean. We've got to be thinking in those terms, and clean being purified from this flow. Then it says hazav, which is to flow, so purified from the flow. It's properly, of course, it's used of water, mostly flowing water, used of things or person, words are flowing out of my mouth at the moment, thoughts are flowing through my mind at the moment. So it's used the way we use the word flow. It's a good use of, it's a good translation, if you will, in English to call it flow. It gets a little confusing in the translation because, well, you guys know. And anyway, so this is, he has, what was our last word? I've already forgotten. Oh, the purification from the flow. Let's see. I have a note here. It looks like. Oh, no, it's on the next word. Mizovo is our next word from flow he. So you have that flow, hazav, and then mizavo from flow he. Well, I don't have any way to show you the Hebrew because I don't have the fonts on this new computer as yet. I completely forgot about it. I meant to do that this week and I totally forgot about it. So I can't show it to you because if I can show it to you, I can show you that these are both the same root word. So the meaning is identical here. So you have something happening here. Maybe if these two words are being put together, then that's used for emphasis or something like that, or maybe not. Sometimes it's not. most of the time it is. So we'll see as we move along through the sentence what's happening here. Then it says, Visafar. That's ve and safar, number, and number. I didn't really mark anything up here. To scratch, to scrape, why would that be? Well, if you're chiseling things in stone or scratching them, into a stone, if you will, or something like that, you're scratching and scraping and stuff like that to make numbers, right? No. Hence, it's to polish. So the word number comes from polish, especially to inscribe. Well, okay, especially it is to scribe. You don't polish letters in stone. That's silly. So anyway, the scratching and the scribing must be the intent here. So, but think of it this way in English. I haven't done this in many years, but I know when we were younger, we used to, when we were counting something up big, we would put a mark, 4 marks and then one across, and that's 5, right? And because you're counting up, that's really kind of the idea. If you know what I'm saying, even though that's not scratching and scraping when you're using a pencil on paper. Think about back in the day, they would have had to do it by scratching and scraping, if you will. Chiseling is what we call it. Then we have lo, which is a sound alike. That just means to he, literally, to it. And in this case, it is the word it, as we like to think of it. Screen is flashing for some reason. I don't know what that means. Then it says Shivat. Well, gosh, you guys should know that word, right? 7. It's the number 7. Then it says Yamin, days. So you're going to scratch out for yourself 7 days. You're going to mark off for yourself 7 days. You need to have some way to remind yourself that there's 7 days. That's why they're using the scratching and the scraping and the chiseling and stuff. You need to remember that 7 days from the time you were purified from the flow. That's where we are at this minute. All right. I guess I could talk about this. I haven't said this in a long time, but this is from the word yom. Yamim is the plural of yom, and that's a day, where Christians in particular, and even some Jews, if you will, where they get this wrong on the idea of creation, the ones who believe that creation happened in 7 24-hour periods. Well, one, you have a problem. You don't have a sun and a moon until day 4. So how do you have 24 hours? You know what I'm saying? There's no rotation, if you will. There's no sun coming up and the moon coming up and the sun going down and all that stuff. That's not happening. So a yom, it can be used of a 24-hour period, and it is from time to time in the Bible, but mostly it's not. Mostly in the Bible, of course, I'm talking the Hebrew Bible here, it's of a period of time. How about the first day in Genesis? Well, that could have been 100 bazillion, frazillion, gazillion years to infinity and beyond times infinity and beyond. I mean, you can't have a set of, like I said, you can't have a set of 24-hour day periods because that's not happening yet. And that actually matches the scientific discovery as they see it as time, so many million years for the Jurassic period and so many for the Cretaceous period, and on it goes, right? I wanted to say Thoracic. I don't think that's right. Seems wrong. But anyway, maybe it is right or wrong. I don't know. But you get the idea. So it could have been a lot of those things. But just think of it this way. God said that in the day that you were in the wilderness, well, that was 40 years. The day was 40 years because it's a period of time. You should never forget that Yom is a period of time. In this case, we're marking off, we're scratching out 7 24-hour day periods. Yes, but this is in a essentially in a legal document. So it's going to tend to be literal, as in the 24 hours, where in the rest of the Bible, not so much. I know it's taken that way most of the time, but not so much. Anyway, just keep that in mind. Then it says the next word is letaharato, which is to cleaning. It's the purity, the purification. So 7 days from the purification. Vechibes, and wash. That's to tread, to trample with the feet, hence to wash garments by treading on them when underwater, because that was your ancient washing machine. They put the clothing on the rocks and then you'd stomp on them and clean them. We just took up the washing machine yesterday here in this house, and it has an agitator, but it's just the bottom of an agitator. It doesn't have the little cone that comes up. It's a different kind of an agitator. And my son and I stood there in complete fascination of that. We were waiting to make sure, because our basement is below the drain level. So we had to hook up a pump to pump the water up to the drain level so it could drain out properly. And we had to wait until that water came out. We didn't know how to just turn it on and fill it up. And we couldn't figure it out. It didn't say, turn it to here to fill it up and turn it to here to rinse, to spit it out. We didn't know what that was. So we had to watch it wash a load of laundry. And this thing was taking the clothing and it would like wad it up and just beat on it. And then it would spit it out and it would unravel. And the next one would wad up and it would beat on it. And it was like, my gosh, that is so much like the way it all started. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But we were both pretty fascinated with that. Anyway, then our next word is begadav, and begad, the clothing, the garments, because it's not just, your shirt, your pants. It's your t-shirt, your shirt, your talit, your pants, your underwear, your socks, your garments. All of these things that touch your body, those are your garments, or that you wear over your body, are your garments. And so it's saying that rahat, there's your word again, you got to wash those. So our next word is, is that the next word or did I miss one? Oh, and wash, it says, besaro. Basar, the skin, your flesh. Okay, what do we have? Mayim, in waters. So you got to lay down in the water and someone's got to stomp on you. No, that's that's how you wash clothing. That's not how you wash people. I hope not, anyway. Then it says Hayim, that's from high. Hi. Hi. Anyway, I love that song. Where was I? Oh, living. So living water is moving water. It's running water. Not like your sink, because that's not likely coming out of a stream. Now, in some cases, that is in fact the truth. But if you live out in the country, it's most likely coming from a well. But your well may be, it may be filled with a running water, with a underground stream, like the one that when I grew up there was an underground stream, but it was filling up the well. And so that water, once it's in that well, is no longer living water because it's sitting there, it's not moving. So the idea is that of a river or a stream. That's what they called living water, biblically speaking. Okay. All right, so we've come to the end of this. So the translation: and when the flow has healed up, he that had a flow is clean, is the way you literally say that in Hebrew in this case. But what it means is, so it's not really idiomatic, because it's he that had a flow is clean, when he that had a flow is clean. I could have actually probably left it that way, but to make it make more sense, I set it up as if it were an idiom and said, and when the flow has healed up, because that's what they mean by that. When you are purified from your flow means when you're healed up. Okay, he will number 7 days from his, or chisel out, he'll number 7 days from his cleansing and wash his garments and wash his flesh in living water, and he is purified, or and is purified. Doesn't really say and he is, it just says and is purified. So the purification, it can be confusing because it's saying when you're purified from it, then you mark out 7 days, you wash your clothes, you wash your body, and then you're purified. Well, when is it? Well, when you're purified from the flow, which means you're healed up from the flow, then you mark off 7 days, you wash your clothes, you wash your body, and then you are purified on that 7th day. Some would argue you have to wash every single day. The text does not say that. Others say, well, you only have to wash everything the night before. And the text doesn't say that either. My feeling about it is that, like many other things, as long as you have washed your body and your clothing, say 3 days before this time, as in when the children of Israel had to purify themselves to be in the presence of God. If purifying yourself 3 days, taking a bath and washing your clothes 3 days before you enter into the to the presence of the Almighty God is still considered clean, then I think 3 days before should be as well, so long as you don't go out and get dirty again, because there is the warning about not having a relation with your wife, if you recall. So that's kind of idiomatic for don't go play in the mud, you know. And yes, it is literal, but the words about the wife, that is literal, but it's really more idiomatic about keep the purity. You know, don't do things you shouldn't be doing. It'll get you all dirty. All right, so verse 14, the literal translation would be, and day the 8th, he took two turtle doves and 2 children dove, and come to faces Yahweh to entrance tent appointed times, and give them to the Cohen. But you can already pretty much tell what that's going to be, right? Our first word is vayon, and in the day, and in that day. And again, because it's legal, it's going to pretty much always be 24 hours. Not necessarily, but pretty much that's a good rule of thumb for legal documents. So in the day, well, what day? Ha Shemini, the 8th day. And in the 8th day, Yikach, so that's he will take to himself. He's going to gather up something on day 8. And of course, it's going to tell us he's going to gather it up just low to himself. Shite, so that's 2, the number 2. Rorim, 2 turtle doves. Honestly, I don't know that we can actually know that these are turtle doves. We think they're turtle doves, but it's the same thing with the tree. It's telling you to cook food on cedar. Well, if that cedar is anything like the cedar that we know of here in America, that will kill you. So I have my doubts as to that being cedar, unless the cedar over in Lebanon, where they grow, is very different than the cedar here in America. I will say I have cedar from Lebanon, and it does look quite different. It doesn't have that reddish color in it. It's just all the white color, the particular large slab of it that I happen to have. Okay, so you're going to take 2 turtle doves, and then it says, oh, the word oh in Hebrew, which means or, this, oh, that, this or that. Or Shenei, that's the number 2. B'nai, which means children, of course, like B'nai Yisrael, the children of Israel. Yonah. We're relatively sure that means dove. But again, anywho, I don't know if you guys know this, but some of these words are so underused, if you will, in the Bible that their meaning has become quite obscure because translations into different languages associated some things very, very much with the wrong thing, like calling the Torah the law. No, Torah is instruction. Mitzvah, that's law. So, you know what I'm saying? Things get connected to the wrong words in other languages. So, especially when you don't have a description of the bird, as is in this case, you can't be positive, but Yonah we're pretty sure of because this one is used so frequently throughout the Bible. Okay, this is Uvah, so he's going to take either those 2 turtle doves or 2 young doves. Isn't that what that was? Turtle doves? Good Lord, I say these things and I'm like, is that what that said? Yeah, 2 turtle doves or 2 turtle doves, or young doves rather. And Uvah, that's and come or bring or go. It's all those words, all those meanings. It's not that it means one or the other, it's that it means any and all of those things, because in Hebrew, that one word, you can't go unless you come. You can't come unless you went. You can't arrive unless you left, and it's all the same word. So, because to the Hebrew mind, they were all exactly the same thing. To us, it's, well, you leave and then you arrive. But in Hebrew, it's not like that. So, anyway. Okay, let's see. Lipne. So he's going to come before the face of God. He's going to bring these things before the face of God. He's going to go to the face of God. He's going to arrive at the face. All these things happen simultaneously, essentially because it's the same meaning. But it's to the faces, the panim, so it's right to that face. Of course, it's in plural because it's a living God, not a dead God, as most of you know, Yahweh. And then it calls God by name. And in case I've never said this before, God only has one name. So all of these books and posters and whatnot that you get, the 37 names of God, the 197 names of God, whatever. No, God only gave himself one name, and it was Yahweh. And it's not pronounced with a W. The W comes from the Germans in the 1800s because the W in the German language makes the V sound. So it's Volkswagen. Wagen, not wagon. We're the ones that put the W sound to it after the fact. There's some things that happen in academia. Let's talk about this a minute. So sometimes in academia, some things have happened that people have lost over the years. When I first started studying in college, I had to start writing papers. And when I started writing these papers, there was this book that they gave us. I don't remember the name of the book. I haven't seen it in years. But in that book, it gave you all these rules for transliteration. So, for instance, if you're using the Hebrew language, there are 2 symbols that make the T sound, like as in our T, right? So essentially they have 2 T's in their alphabet. Well, one is called the Tav, one is called the Tate. And in order for people to know which one was used and why this was important in transliteration, I don't know. But when they would transliterate, not translation, transliteration. Translation tells you what the word means. Transliteration uses your alphabet in place. Something doesn't look right here. Well, whoops. I pushed the wrong button. Okay, now that I'm up with the class here, sorry. Translation tells you what the word means. If I say the word, for instance, El, you could say that means God. It doesn't really mean God. It means mighty hero. My hero. Something like that. But who's the ultimate hero? God. So it's used of God an awful lot. But it doesn't actually mean God. And so when we say Elohim, that's the same word as in plural, right? And so that's only used of God. Well, I shouldn't say it's only used of God. It's used generically for the word God because it's used of fake gods and real gods because it's a generic word in Hebrew. But if you were going to take the word El and transliterate it, which would mean use our alphabet so that we can look at that word and pronounce it properly, you might write El. Some write EIL because they pronounce it ale instead of L. Either way is fine. But what happens is because there's a tav and a tate, the two T's, they would put T to represent the tav and then TH to represent the tate. You were never supposed to pronounce it Timothy. It was still supposed to be Timato. Timato. That's funny. I didn't make that connection till just now. Anyway, you weren't supposed to pronounce that TH sound. Well, over the years, people started using that book that made all those rules less and less and less until the point where most people don't even use it anymore. And so you get all these college graduates who've never seen or even heard of this, and they don't know that they're pronouncing words very improperly. That's where that comes from. Anyway, give you that one for free. So let's see. Our next word is El, which is not exactly what you might think. This is a sound alike. It's spelled differently, but it sounds like the word I was just speaking about, the mighty hero word. But this is to, T-O. And it's indicative of motion. It's to turn from here to here. Because we think of verbs as words of action and nouns as identifiers of things, people, places, and things. But those are the rules to English grammar. Those are not the rules to Hebrew. The biblical Hebrew didn't have any such thing. There were no verbs and there were no nouns. We try to identify them that way because in the Bible, if a word is what we think of as a noun, they usually use a two-letter spelling of it, where if it's a verb, it has a three-letter root, which means it can have more than three letters, but the root will be in that word, and we'll call that a verb. Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. Things that we think of as a noun are verbs in Hebrew, about half the time. And things that we think of as verbs, well, they're generally verbs. That one pretty much stays right. But those are not grammar rules that should be applied to the Bible. You should not get caught up in that. If for instance, the word shepherd, like Yahweh Roi Loexar, Roi, the word for shepherd, or in that case, my shepherd. That word we think of, well, that's the guy that goes out and takes sheep. So we think of it as a noun because that's that person. No, it's never a noun in Hebrew. Never, never, never. Because the person cannot be separated from what he is and what he does. That's all the same thing. So it's always a verb and never a noun. You should never think of that as a noun. But anyway, let's move on. So we have the word to, petach. So you're going to take it to the entrance. That's a word for entrance. It's the word, you can use it for a door, you can use it for a gate, you can use it for the entrance, which may have or may not have a door or a gate, but it's the entrance. then an ohel. So it's the entrance of the tent. So you think about that. There's actually more than one entrance to the tent. There's the entrance where you come up to the fencing on the outer edge, and then there's the entrance at the door, if you will, because at the fencing you've got a gate. It's made of material at this point, in time, because we're talking about the tabernacle, not the temple, and so it has that's a gate at an entrance, and then when you get up to the entrance of the tent itself, then you're at a door, which is also made of material. So, but we would think of them as two different things, particularly when you build the temple, because now you literally have a gate where the fencing is at the outer edge, and then when you come on the inside, you actually have what we think of as a door to enter in. So, but we're in the time of the tabernacle here, and they were not what we think of as today. But anyway, at the entrance of the tabernacle, moed. So it's the tabernacle of appointed times, because moed, that's what that means, appointed times. And that indicates that there are times appointed for you to be there. For instance, last weekend we had Shavuot. It is appointed by God that you show up for the opening meeting and the closing meeting. And in the opening meeting, and I caught myself, it was too late by the time I caught it, but I'd forgotten to tell everybody you're supposed to show yourself on the first meeting, and you're supposed to bring an offering. Remember, this is one of the big three. So if you didn't do that, don't worry too much about it. I totally spaced on that one and forgot to tell anybody. So anyway, let's try to get that right next year. I do not believe there's a penalty here for you guys. I think I'm in trouble over that, because that's my job to remind you guys. So I think if anyone's in trouble, it's me. So anyway, if you haven't sent your offering in for it, though, you really should at least do that. And again, God has no minimum or maximum on it. So that's completely up to whatever you want to give or can afford to give, whichever the case is. Maybe they'll match. That'd be nice. Because some of us would like to give $1 million, but that's probably never going to happen. Well, anyway, our next word is unetanam, which is and give them. So that's that to give, to cause, to receive. And of course, my favorite story on that is the night that man sat us down at a table and told us he was going to give us the $20,000 in cash he had in this little case. But he did not cause us to receive it. He said, I'll give it to you on Monday. Well, what's wrong with right now? I'm right here. But we're still waiting on, we're not sure which Monday he meant. We're still, this is years later. This is 15 years later. We're still waiting on that Monday to happen. Anyway, so to give in biblical terms is to cause to receive. You literally have to place it in their hand or place it in their checking account or whatever. You have to make sure that they receive whatever it is. So we use the word place or give interchangeably in our translation here, because it depends on what he's doing. If he's going to place something on the altar, he's still giving something. Because you give it on the altar, or you give it in the hand, or I don't know. Hopefully you're following the craziness in my head there today. This is El, which is that word of motion, which means to. Ha-Kohen. So in this case, we're not placing it on the altar. We are placing it into the hand of the Kohen. We're causing him to receive these two birds. So our translation, and on the 8th day, he, speaking of the person with the flow, will take 2 turtle doves or 2 young doves and appear before Yahweh. That's 2 faces appear, he'll come before the faces of Yahweh. Could have said it that way, but he'll appear before Yahweh, at the entrance of the Ohel Moed, the tent of meetings, of course, and place them in the Cohen's hands. If you don't want to do that because it didn't say anything about hands, then you say, and give them to the Cohen, which is kind of why we change back and forth, because of the way the sentence is written. In this case, since it's saying you're going to give them to the Cohen, and it would sound funny if you said, and place them to the Cohen, right? But in other cases, when different words, or like if it says, give it into the hand of the Cohen, we might say, place it in the hands of the Cohen. Anyway, hopefully that was a good example of why we do that. Okay. Oh, wow. I totally forgot to set my timer. Oh, there's one. Look at there. That tells me I'm roughly halfway through, I guess. I hate it when they're going forward. I like them going backwards. And my wife sent me one. I totally forgot to turn it on. Anyway. All right. So 15, and made with them the Cohen one sin and one burnt offering, and cover upon him the Cohen to faces Yahweh from Flohi. Okay. The asa, which is to labor, to work about, to make, to produce, to manufacture, to fabricate, right? So sometimes we just use the word do, D-O. Other times we use different words, but and make, in this case, otam, we would say with them, make with them, ha Cohen. So the Cohen's going to make with them or of them, echad, one. That's echad is one. And I heard somebody say something completely wrong about echad this week. He was, I don't want to name names, but I will say he's my favorite. He's the man I think is the smartest man in the world. But he got out of his lane and decided to teach the psychological version of the Bible, which I thought was going to be really great. But his understanding of the Bible was so completely off at times that his conclusions were really wrong. Sorry. But that's what happens when you get out of your lane. He should have gotten for himself a rabbi that could have given him the right foundation and then let him do the psychology part. But anyway, his take on echad was completely wrong. Echad is the joining together of many to make up one, and this is not Trinitarian. It has nothing to do with Trinitarian. But of course, the image behind echad is a rope. And I didn't know this until I actually took a rope apart one time. I don't remember why I did that. I wasn't trying to figure out echad at all, but I noticed that in this rope, you would think that every single strand in this rope was the same length, and then they just spun it and spun it and spun it and spun it. Because if you take 3 strands and tie them between 2 bumpers, they're going to snap immediately, right? There's no strength. But if you take, say, 300 or 3,000 strands and you wind them up very, very tightly together to where you have one rope and tie that between 2 bumpers, somebody's bumper may come off. And so that's the idea of echad, is it's the joining together of the many to make one strong. Okay. This does not mean that God is a whole bunch of different gods and you join that all together and you have the one ultimate powerful God. No. The joining together of God is not Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. The joining together of God is righteousness, judgment, love, peace, mercy, and on and on and on and on and on and on it goes. There are not enough words in any language. You take them, all the languages that have ever existed, and find every single adjective, put them all together, and you still won't have enough adjectives to describe the attributes of God. What makes God one is all of his attributes together. It's the same thing that makes me one man. I have at times anger. I have happiness. I have love. I have joy. I have interests, many different interests. I like to play music. Used to like to dance, but now that my back and hips hurt so bad, not so much. Besides, I'm pretty wobbly on my feet in my old age. Um, I like to study. I like to read. I like, just on and on it goes. And all of those things about me make me who I am, including everything that I ever did, all of the changes that came about with my age. Because as you get older, when you're a child, you think as a child, and hopefully you will mature at some point and become a man and start thinking like a man. And then, even then, the older you get, the more life experience that you've lived, the more books perhaps that you've read, the more knowledge that you've gained, the more you've changed. So you are the sum total of all of those things bound together make you that one man. And that's what a chad is. It's not, different men being put together. So in the situation of a husband and wife, what makes them one? Well, it's certainly not the intimate thing that goes on in the bedroom. That is not it. It doesn't have it. Well, I guess it has a little bit to do with it, but not a lot. Now, that's only one attribute. If you have one attribute, you're an idol. Come on, we're not idols. We're real. We're living. We're alive. So it's the years. It's the ups and the downs and the backwards and the forwards and all of the experiences and all the conversations and all of the sunrises and sunsets experienced together, all the vacations, all of the children and all the interactions with your children, and it just every part of what you guys did together. That's what makes two people one. All right. So that's what echad is. It's the joining of many attributes. It is not the joining of many things. As in, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. That's nonsense. All right. So we have, he's going to take these two birds and he's going to make this sacrifice. That one of them, it says, one of the sacrifices will be for the chatat. That's the sin sacrifice. And to sin is to wander or stumble from the path of Torah. And I guess I should say it again, just in case somebody out there hasn't heard me. There's one verse in the New Testament that I believe that every Christian and every Jew should memorize. Yes, every Jew should memorize a verse in the New Testament. It is a powerful verse, and it was written by the same man, Jews, who gave us the Mishnah, the same man. Part of his work is in the New Testament, in case you didn't know that. So, Yochanan ben Zakkai, if you need to know who it is. You probably already knew that, right? If you're Jewish. Anyway, this guy wrote a single verse in there that stood out to me more than anything else that I ever saw in those letters. But he said, everyone who commits sin is also in violation of the Torah, comma, that's not the end of the sentence. Because sin is Torah rebellion. That tells you the sum total of what sin is and what sin is not. And if you find anything in violation of the words that man just said, it's wrong. I don't care if it comes out of the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Agadah, the Halacha, you go on, no matter what it is. Because we know from those words, this is one of the most significant Jewish men who's ever lived. He's the least known among them in most of the world, but he is one of the most significant. And he told us the sum total of what sin is and what it is not. So sin is Torah rebellion. So if the Torah says do this and you don't, you are in sin. If the Torah doesn't tell you yes or no, then it's not a sin. And it does not make any difference how offended you become by whatever this thing is. If the Torah does not call it a sin, it is not a sin. End of period, end of story. It's not a sin. If it tells you that it is, it doesn't matter how much you want to belittle it, how much you want to marginalize it, it's still a sin, right? So that clarifies it. So when the Christians come to the Jews and start saying, well, if you drink, you cuss, and you smoke cigars, then you're going to hell. No, I'm not. The Bible does not, the Torah doesn't say any such thing. But on the other hand, if the Jew goes to the Christian and says, you're sinning because, you're not following Rashi, and Rashi has no part in the Torah. He did write about it, but he has no part in it. So we now know what is and what is not sin. We're going to have to know what the Torah says, I guess, to really know it. But we can stop feeling guilty about things that aren't even a sin. I mean, I was born Jewish, yes, but I wasn't raised Jewish. I was raised going to church, and those people had me wound up in knots. They everything that I did, thought, or didn't do or didn't think was a sin. And I had to go down and repent every single Sunday morning, every single Sunday night, and every single Wednesday night. And any other thing that we had in between, I had to repent because I was going to go to hell if I didn't. I mean, we had the sidewalls. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Tires used to have these big white stripes around them. And we used to have to put the finger on the crease of our ear here. And if the hair was touching the top of the finger, we were gonna go to hell because our hair wasn't allowed to touch the top of our ear. Really? Where's that in the Torah? But we didn't know what sin was and what it was not back then. If I'd known, I wouldn't have had to live under so much guilt and condemnation. And I think that's the knee-jerk reason why Christians are so quick to call the Torah legalism and bondage. Well, first off, when you say that, you're accusing God of being the author of legalism and bondage. I would be really careful with that if I were you. Right? That's a seriously dangerous thing for someone to do. Because God is the author of everything perfect and pure. Can we agree on that? And even in the New Testament, it says that the law is perfect and pure. It says it more than once in the New Testament. Imagine that. But I think that because when you grow up in Christianity and every little thing that you do or don't do is a sin, if you're not out the day after you get saved, and I have to say it that way because that's not salvation. That is not biblical salvation. It doesn't even jive with the New Testament. But anyway, that's what it became. And that's what's still pushed out there. And if you're not out there preaching Jesus the day after you get saved, which is quite literally in violation of what the New Testament actually says, not a novice lest he boast. How about that verse? If you're not out there doing that, then you're not a good Christian, or you're going to hell, depending on which denomination you're a part of. So when you live that bound up, and you start hearing someone say, "Hey, you got to live by the law," oh no, legalism and bondage. No, that's called projection. You're projecting your problems onto something that is not a problem. As Yeshua himself said that the law, it wasn't even hard. He said, it's his yoke is easy and his burden is light. His yoke is Torah. His burden is the mitzvah. And he's saying it's not even hard, people. That's what he was saying. It's not hard to do, and it isn't. We're the ones that make it hard. And it's usually because when we come to it, truly come to it, whether you're raised in the Jewish tradition, you're all bound up by Jewish tradition. And so when you come to the point where you're willing to live by the Torah, it becomes a very difficult thing because you're fighting against traditions that are often in violation of the Torah itself. And that's something that you can't reconcile. And so when you've been brought up in the Christian tradition, you're doing exactly the same thing. When you come into the Torah, you begin to fight against this thing, right? But the truth is, if you don't understand the Torah in very simplistic terms, you don't understand the Torah, because it is a very simplistic book. It is not, as Jordan Peterson says, complicated. If it's complicated, you don't understand it. It's a very simple book. It's for simple people and simple lives, because we've got enough complication in life without God adding to it, and God did not do any such thing. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. Those are very true words about the Torah and the mitzvot. Anyway, said a little more on that subject than I normally do, didn't I? Oop, I better look at the time. Ooh, it's getting close. Our next word, hola, hola. When you live in Texas, that means something completely different, right? That means hello, I think. But that's the word, the Hebrew word for burnt offering. What's laid on the altar? It's a barbecue. We could actually put the word barbecue in translation of hola, and people would probably be a lot less afraid of Judaism. Just saying, because that's the ultimate goal. You're going to cook it so that you can eat it. Anyway, vaYiqra, and cover over, a covering, that kind of thing. This talit is a covering. It's covering my shirt. Anyway, because my shirt covers me. My talit covers my shirt. Anywho. So we're talking about a covering, and they use the example of pitch on a roof, hair. Oh, I think I breathed in some dirt. Hair on a head is a covering, that sort of thing. Then it's alav. It's a covering upon him. Well, who's the him? Let's think about that. HaKohen, is it a covering over the Kohen, or is the Kohen the covering? Let's keep thinking. This is lipnei, well, that's to the faces, so we know it's before, in the presence of. Yahweh, of course. That's the name of God. The one name. Then it says mizilvo. Y'all remember that from earlier? From the flow? Okay. Under the word sin offering, I have this note. It says, let's talk about these words inserted by Kyle and Deluche. I haven't brought them up in a while. There is I have trespass marked out because it's really the wrong word. Oh, guilt offering. There is a guilt offering and a sin offering. Now they're calling it trespass and sin. I'm calling it a guilt offering and a sin offering. The guilt offering is for things that we have done in violation of the instructions given to us concerning the law. Remember, the law is the mitzvot, or the law is the do's and the don'ts, where the mitzvot tell us how to live out the do's and the don'ts, right? That's actually the Torah. The Torah is the instruction. Okay, so the guilt offering is for things that we have done in violation of the instructions given concerning the law. The sin offering is for rebellion of the law. The instruction of the law tells us that we are not to eat the meat of a sacrifice after so many days. Do y'all remember that from back when we were studying the sacrifices? The mitzvah, or law, is that we must make the meat offering. The instruction is that we cannot eat it after so many days, and it depends on which offering we're talking about, because some of them you can eat it until it's gone, and some of them you can't eat it after the second or the third day or whatever. Thus, if we make no offering, we sin. because we're commanded to make the offering, right? So if we don't do that, we've committed a sin. If we mess up the instructions by eating it after we are not allowed to, we have now incurred guilt. So the guilt offering is for the sin we commit against the instructions, while the sin offering is for our rebellion against the law. I hope that helps to clarify that some. Ooh, I am really running out of time. Okay, let me give you some examples. A guilt offering, we forgot to wear our fringe today. A sin offering, we refused to wear our fringe. A guilt offering, we found leavening in our home after Pesach. A sin offering, we refused to stay out of our house overnight during Pesach. A guilt offering, we didn't get our temporary dwelling built on the first day of Sukkot. A sin offering, we refused to stay in a temporary dwelling during Sukkot. Hope that helps. Of the words burnt offerings, we can compare this to vaYiqra, which we're in vaYiqra, but this is chapter 7, verse 5. It says, a burnt offering to Yahweh, it is a guilt offering. Colin DeLuce said of verse 8, verse 8 of chapter 7, yeah. In the case of the burnt offering, the skin of the animal was to fall to the lot of the officiating priest. Remember that they have to be skinned before they can be chopped up to be cooked, right? And so that skin was very valuable, and it would be given to the priest as a payment for his service, they said. His services in making the sacrifice. Okay, so that's hakohen in Hebrew. Then it says hakohen is construed absolutely, they said, as for the priest who offered the skin of the burnt offering which he offered shall belong to the priest. It says to him in Hebrew. This was probably the case also with the guilt offering and the sin offering of the laity, whereas the skin of the pieces, remember peace offering is actually in plural, so I've always called it the pieces offering, that belonged to the owner of the animal. I don't really know why that was so important of them to say. Okay, here's my translation. And the Cohen will perform with them, speaking of the birds, one sin offering and one burnt offering or guilt offering. And the Cohen will be a covering. The Cohen will be a covering before Yahweh over he who had the flow. The Cohen is the covering. The sin offering is not made because the man did something wrong. Remember this. You don't do, well, you having an accident, scraping your arm open does not make you a sinner. You have committed no sin, as it were. It is made because we are commanded to be pure at all times. And when we become impure, say we've scraped our arm on something and cut it open, and that blood, of course, makes us impure because that's a flow. So even if it's by no fault of our own, we are still unclean because we're supposed to be pure at all times, and therefore must make an offering for our purification. Okay, I have surely run out of time, and I knew I didn't have to call you Shirley, but I did anyway. Next week we will begin with 16. It is a brand new category, and get into the part that I'm not going to enjoy teaching. Just going to say it that way. But anyway, so if you want to, if your children are under the age of, 11 or 12, you may or may not want them to hear this stuff. If they're of that age, that preteen into their early teens especially, or any part of the teens, to tell you the truth, they're going on to their 20s and 30s, they probably should hear this stuff. Because even if they're not affected by it yet, it's coming way faster than you think. I've raised a couple of kids, or 5 or 12, lots of kids. I can tell you, it comes on you very quickly, and you're not prepared for it. So if you have kids of that age, you might want to think about letting them hear this stuff. It is very adult, is in to the degree that it's you have to have entered into the pubescent part of your life for this to be anything that you need to be concerned with. So if they're pre that age, getting ready to turn that age or are that age, then it's time. But if, on the other hand, you want to teach it to them personally, then, and that's kind of what this whole thing is about, is it's supposed to be you teaching it. But you understand in Hebrew, in the Hebrew world of the Bible, if I teach it, if you let your kids learn it from me, then you have taught your children. You are not breaking the law in any way if you let them learn from me. On the other hand, if you're more comfortable having this conversation your way with them after you've heard me teach this, which could be the case, then that's perfectly fine, because the teaching, in one way or the other, has to come from you. It has to be your decision, is what I'm saying. We are getting into that from the very get-go next week, because that's the new category. All right. Shalom v'shalom, y'all. I may have pushed the wrong button. There we go. Turn this thingy off. Push this thing.
The blessing, vaYiqra. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.